Hello, hello, how are you doing? I hope you're well wherever you are in the world, and hopefully we can provide you with a little bit of light entertainment, whether you're well or not. But yeah, I know it can be a bit boring sometimes when you're not well, but you're not feeling up to doing anything. Hi, Squibble, great to have you here. Um, sorry, I'm just mentally, my brain just went sideways for a moment because I was really busy watching the timer on my stream for when I normally start, and then suddenly I got distracted by finding a new jigsaw puzzle, and it's like, oh no. But hey, we're here, that's good. um Great to have you here too, and I hope that you're actually got some nice quiet, gentle, peaceful stuff that you can keep your hands and eyes occupied with while I'm reading. And if you need to go off and do other things, that's all good too. um I'll try to keep my intro short today just because I've noticed, because I was just doing some video editing to put them on YouTube this morning, and I realized, oh my goodness, my intros get longer and longer and longer. And one of them, at least, my intro was longer than the reading time. So let's see if we can change something about that. Um, what else have I got to say that's going on? I've got a new microphone stand, just so that if I am typing, it doesn't go thunk quite as loudly. Look, at the moment it's the demo version, so we've got hair ties and we've got zip ties to hold it all together. But eventually we'll get there, so we can get some things trimmed, and and it's giant skewers and a piece of plywood all holding it together. But the hair ties are in tension, so therefore the microphone is suspended by those, and you shouldn't hear the thump when you'll hear the click, but you shouldn't hear the thump when I hit my keys on the keyboard. So we'll just see how it goes. And I've also been investigating the possibility of what I can do with commands for my streaming, so that if somebody new arrives or something like that, they can be acknowledged without me having to do quite so much typing, but also so it can look a little bit more engaging. And also still thinking quite seriously about what I'm going to do about my overlay. So I have a bigger video window, not quite so much room taken up with just big blank spots, but still have room for things like a jigsaw puzzle without it being distracting when I transfer things across to YouTube. So it's like it's a work in progress. Yours is held up by hair ties too? Oh, that's nice to know I'm not the only one. That's really good. I do want to give you a shout out, Squibble, but I'd like to do that a little bit later on when we get a few more people here, because at the moment there's not very many people so they won't see who you are and then go across and follow you on your channel, which I really want them to do. So therefore I will say something a little bit more in a little while. I hope I remember. Please remind me if I forget. Anyway, I am going to turn on the jigsaw puzzle right now. So here we go, there's the jigsaw puzzle, and anyone who wants to do the jigsaw puzzle can just, hi Q, great to have you here, Coleslaw. Anyone who wants to do the jigsaw puzzle, the link should be active in my chat now. So if you put the command !jigsaw or !puzzle, then it will give you the invite link so you can play that, and it'll keep your hands and your eyes occupied while I'm reading to you. Great to have you guys both here, and anyone else who's here who's just sort of hiding in the background too, because I'm sure there are some. There's probably a few things. Yeah, I also need to get some commands set up so that they're on timers, so that I don't actually need to type things in, which would be a good idea. It's apparently not that hard to do, I just haven't got around to doing it. So first of all, we have the welcome message, which just says, I don't know, what I do here, I suppose. And I don't need to read it to you because you guys can do that. And I've got a disclaimer. Yes, all of these should be on timers. And I'm putting these in here, and you guys can scroll back up and read them whenever you feel like it. And there's also an 18 plus, which is basically because Twitch rules state that you need to be 18 or older to be here. Now, what I do on the stream is not 18 plus. It's designed to be suitable for grannies and their grandkids who are wanting some light entertainment. And Granny is delighted because she's actually found someone who knows books that she grew up reading or she read to her children, that sort of thing. So my stream is suitable for that, but to meet Twitch terms of usage requirements, I have my disclaimer in there. And it also means if somebody says something inappropriate, I don't get in trouble for it quite the same way. No, I'm not labeling my stream as being 18 plus because it's not, but just for safety purposes, that's why that link is in there. That information is in there. I'm trying to remember all the little bits and pieces I've got written down, and I'm looking around the place at the moment because I've got them written. I've got my commands written down on a piece of paper. I just forgot where I had them written. Standing up so I can see them. Trying to think of if there's anything else I needed to specifically say at this stage. Probably not. So what about I do my normal little introduction for those who are new over on YouTube, but also anyone who might be new here, and we can then get on with what we're doing, which is reading old books. So here you go. Hi, I'm Jev. I read old children's books, such as these. I actually found more than one. Such as these. These are books that my parents and grandparents grew up reading, and they were passed on to me just by way of something to read when I was growing up. Those particular ones I didn't read because they were passed on to me a bit later, but I have a lot of other books like that in boxes downstairs in storage. And when I eventually get the space behind me sorted out with bookshelves and I don't need a green screen, then, because my space is actually storage space for most of the storage space for the house, then I will actually have the books on shelves and I will read from physical books rather than just ebooks. Anyway, so I read old books because those are the books I read when I was growing up. I thoroughly enjoyed them, and also because I found that they were a great way of expanding my understanding of other people and other places and different time periods. Because whether an author intends to or not, even if they are writing about something completely imaginary and not of their own time period, they will still express their own views of the world. And when they do that, and we are reading these words for ourselves or listening to them, it actually gets inside your head and you start to identify with the people you are reading about more than if you were just watching something on TV. It's one of the magical things about reading is that you actually start to visualize for yourself what the author is talking about. Now, the picture in your head might look different to the picture in the author's head, but it still has a lot more relation to each other than, say, if you're watching a TV series, they're already drawing it for you, so you're not needing to draw anything in your head. I suppose that's a big part of it. Anyway, so for me, it's a great way for us to extend our own understanding of other people, times, places, and develop empathy too. So there are aspects of different time periods that we don't agree with now, attitudes towards slavery, gender identity, racism, other countries, all sorts of things, lots and lots, and there's no way I can cover them all. That is not definitely not a comprehensive list, but there's a lot of attitudes from other time periods that are not what we would agree with now, personally or as a broader society. But where we are now has been developed from other times and other places and other attitudes. It's a progression. And we need to not think that we've got it sorted and they are all very old-fashioned and got it all wrong. Because the people who come after us in the future will think that we were very old-fashioned and got it wrong because they would have actually built their what become their norms based on what they have seen and learnt and experienced from our generation. So we can all learn from each other and go forward and improve, which is a good thing just as well. Anyway, so that's a big part of why I read, and I just enjoy stories anyway. I read children's books. There are other members of Codex who are a group of online book readers who all read public domain books, or ones that they have specific permission to read. And the other readers will sometimes read children's books, but I'm the only one who just reads children's books. So if you are looking for more book readers to listen to, then check out the Codex readers. Now, we have a Twitch team. Some of the members are actually already in the Twitch team. Some of them are still getting there because you've got to do some authorizations and accept terms and conditions and things like that to be part of a team. But also, if you join our Discord server, you'll get to know everybody that way because people post in the Discord server. When you first read the rules of the Discord server, it might come across as being specifically for readers, but it's not. The actual Discord server is for anyone who's interested in public domain books, basically. Great way to chat together, to get to know each other. We're people from all over the world. Most of us are English speakers. We've got librarians, school teachers, actors, voice actors, audiobook narrators, people who actually do it for a job, but then for the fun of it, they do it in their spare time, but then they get to chat in between. And not everybody only does reading and chatting. There are a lot of the others in the group who actually will play games and things like that as well. So go for it. Go and follow the link to the Twitch team and also follow the link to the Discord server. Join the Discord server, get to know some other people and expand your reading material. Anyway, so there's all that. I think that was all there was about Codex. I do have 3 tips for those of you who are new here. First tip, drinks. Second tip, snacks. And third tip is comfort. So by way of tip number 1, make sure you have water. Always have water handy to drink because water is one of the things that is essential to your body's survival. If you are dehydrated, you will not be able to think well. And I don't even mean dehydration to the point of having a headache, which is actually not that dehydrated really. But your thinking becomes very sluggish. You're a lot more alert and able to think constructively when you are well hydrated, but your body also functions better. So give it the fuel it needs, but don't leave it just at water. If you have other favorite drinks, while you're here, you are most welcome to imbibe. I gulped. I haven't done that one quite like that before. Sorry about that. That was unexpected. Sorry. Anyway, so I drink coffee, and at the moment I'm drinking black coffee, just because it's not quite as strong as what I make it when I'm putting milk into it. Right. My voice will come right as I go, so I'll carry on. So that was drinks. Snacks. It's always much more fun when you're listening to a book if you have something yummy to eat. So for me today, I have crackers with cheese and sun-dried tomato. There you go. If you have sweets that you can enjoy, all the better. I try not to have too much sugar because otherwise it aggravates migraines, and I have too many problems with migraines, so let's just avoid that for me. Anyway, but if you want sugar, go for it. Yeah, and lurk away. That's one of the other things I was going to say, is you're most welcome to sit here and listen or stand, office work, whatever you're doing, and listen without having to actually engage in the chat. That's all good. And thank you, Coleslaw, for actually using the alert command because it helps others also to understand what's going on. I don't know if you noticed it, but I changed the response slightly in it. So drinks, snacks, and number 3 was comfort. Make sure you have somewhere, if you can, somewhere comfortable to sit or stand. Here's my reminder for me. Comfortable cushion. The one that makes this slightly funny sound in the speaker. Because, hey, if you're going to sit and enjoy something, you might as well be comfortable while you're doing it. Unless you have to work. If you have to work, that's okay. I'm all good with that. Just don't expect, if you're new here, don't expect my reading to be the standard of an audiobook, because there's no way we're ever getting anywhere near that level. I used to think it would be a cool thing to do, and then after I started reading, I thought, I like being able to have the spontaneity that I have here, to be able to make the mistakes, be able to get lost in the page and all that sort of stuff. I am so sorry, Q, about the fact that you got concerned for a sec. Your cat got concerned for a second. Yes. Yeah, thanks. I'm tempting to put in a coffee command like like Squibble has on their Discord server. Actually, I'm going to give you a shout out now anyway. So Squibble does artwork, gorgeous artwork. One of the things she's been working on is illustrations for the Wizard of Oz book. And it's a long-term project for her. She's just developing these various illustrations. And another thing, and I think that's her Thursday projects, is the Wizard of Oz illustrations. Another one is the Rosy Moths. I'm getting it wrong. I know the word rose is in there and moth is in there, and I can't remember the rest of it. And I'm not quite sure what stage of that. And I think they're illustrations for a book. They look like it. Anyway, beautiful artwork. And in the past, she's also done a lot of things like emotes and things like that. And if you actually take part in her Twitch streams and also join her Discord server, you will see these gorgeous emotes. They're very much her own, and I love them. I think they're wonderful, and I really wish I could actually do digital art like that to be able to create my own. So in the meantime, all I do is the weirdo edited photos that have odd colours in and slightly distorted effects for some things. Anyway, it works. It's me. It probably is more representative of me anyway. Ah, that's better. Right. Now, so we've done drinks, snacks, and comfort. We're doing well, aren't we? And that is another command I want to put in sometimes so we get a little graphic that drifts across the screen. I haven't got there yet. We'll get there. Catch my breath for a moment. And for some reason, my stream is looking like it's not actually in particularly good quality. There's a lot of dropped frames. That is odd. Why is that happening? Oh dear. There's a lot of dropped frames. Let's just see if I can refresh that page over on the other screen and see if it makes a difference, because sometimes it's just a bit lagging in terms of information. Nope, that's not made a difference at all. There must have been something else that's changed in my settings, and I don't know what. So I'm sorry if it's all pixelated or the sound is jangly. There's not a lot I can do about that until I restart the whole setup and dig into the background. And I'm not doing that while I'm in the middle of reading a story to you or anything else like that. Rosy Maple Moths. Why do I forget the word maple? I don't know, because maple syrup is one of my most favourite things, and it's probably because I must have had a fair bit of it when I was over in Canada when I was a kid. Anyway, no worries about you being slow to reply at all, Squibble, because it was entirely fitted in with what was going on. So I think, was there anything else I needed to tell you about? Oh yeah, I've got a Discord server. I'll give you the link for that. Now, I joke about it being the world's quietest Discord server because we don't really talk very much and we don't actually do a lot most of the time. Oh, and I need to turn on chat for everybody else, so it's not just the VIPs who can actually chat. Sorry about that. Anyone else who's arrived and didn't actually get a chance to say anything, you can catch up now. And I just a forewarning for those who are new here, I do have some quite stringent anti-spam and anti-bot activity, bad bot activity settings in my stream, just because I want it to be a suitable, safe place for grannies and their grandkids. It's just the way it is. And I have no idea why it's doing that. It's not my computer in terms of the processing ability of my computer. Must be something else going on. No idea. Right. I think it's probably about time to read. Yeah, the bit rate's a bit lower than it normally is. No clues. Hi Blue, great to have you here. Good to see you again. Yes, Jigsaw, go for it. That's the way. I try to keep it, for those who are new here, I try to keep it so you have something to do with your eyes and your hands while I'm reading the story, because a lot of the stories don't actually have a lot of illustrations. They're not like picture books. They're actually chapter books that have the odd illustration in them. So here we go. It may well be that New Zealand internet at the moment is a little bit glitchy. I wouldn't be too surprised if that was the case. We're on fibre and we're not far from the exchange, so it should be okay. But that makes me think that it's actually something in the main system rather than us. So we'll see what happens. And if I find that the whole thing drops out, I'll probably just restart OBS, restart the stream. So if I do suddenly disappear, yeah, I think it's New Zealand internet at the moment is probably what's happening, or reasonably regional, and therefore it's affecting what you guys are getting. I am a bit disappointed that the visuals are so poopy. Anyway, if I find that it times out, don't disappear. Just stick me in another browser tab and come back in a few minutes, because what I may end up having to do is actually restart our home network. It may actually be something to do with that. I don't know. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I'm going to get it on with reading. I don't think I need to give you any more links. No, that'll do. Right. So we're reading A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, who is basically the founder of English Schoolgirl Stories. This particular one is not a schoolgirl story, but it's the first of the stories written for the fun of it, for the girls to enjoy, rather than stories written to teach them moral points, which a lot of the late Victorian children's stories still were at that stage. And I think that's a big part of why she's considered to be such a groundbreaker in terms of what she was writing once she got over the first few, which were the standard old-fashioned Victorian moralistic kids' stories. The sort of thing which adults thought that children ought to read rather than children reading them because they wanted to. Anyway, so this is A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, and it was published in 1904. Yes, I'm looking all over the place. And we are reading Chapter 7, which is Maud Middleton's Party. There you go. And we're not doing too bad because that's not half an hour yet. Good, we're doing well. Yeah, all is well here apart from me nearly choking on my coffee and terrifying the other viewers. The day before yesterday, the read I did do, but I missed 2 last week. And I'm really, really sorry about that, but I had to take my dad down to hospital for a surgical procedure and then pick him up 2 days later. He's doing really well, so you don't need to panic about that. But it's just I'm the person in the family who apparently can cope with driving down to the city, waiting in the car, dealing with hospital staff if I have to speak to them and stuff like that. We're a bunch of introverts and people who are probably on the autism spectrum. I say probably, I'm fairly certain I am, but others in the family I think probably are too. And so therefore, because I'm dealing with an elderly family member, I'm the one who gets to do that. Anyway, so you didn't miss too much, thankfully. And also, if you find that it gets too pixelated now, then probably in 2 weeks' time, the story will be up on YouTube if you do want to catch up with it then, a better version of it. I can't change what goes up to Twitch, but because my computer actually saves the original footage, not what gets broadcast, then I will actually have a better version available for YouTube. So we'll see how we go. Anyway, Chapter 7, Maud Middleton's Party. Methinks, good friend, today I scarce do know thee. The fashion of thy manner hath so changed. And that's the opening bit of poetry or something. Oh, Aunt Helen, cried Peggy, bursting into the dining room one afternoon where her aunt was busy adding up accounts. Can't we all go to Maud Middleton's party? And who... Sorry, now I'm burping. I think it's that coughing from before. And who is Maud Middleton, I should like to know, inquired Aunt Helen, pausing in the midst of her butcher's bill. I have not heard you mention her before. Is she one of your schoolfellows? Oh, no, she is the dearest girl. They have a French governess, but they go to dancing class on Fridays. And Maud and I always dance together, and I simply love her, said Peggy, who was apt to take up friendships with enthusiasm. But, my dear child, you have not yet told me who she is. I cannot have you making friends with any shopkeeper's daughter from Warford. Oh dear, Aunt Helen's a little bit of a snob. She's actually quite good most of the time, but they're also the family from the manor house, effectively, even though it's just a bit of a scruffy old farmhouse these days. The property was, once upon a time, a more important one. And so, therefore, we have this slight um, expectations of how people are meant to be because you are representing how one ought to behave and all that sort of stuff, which is probably why we had the whole Sunday thing going on when Peggy went out to do good things to help people. Anyway. Oh, they're not at all like that, declared Peggy. Maud's just lovely, with long yellow curls right down to her waist, and Muriel's almost grown up, though she's only as old as Lillian. She wears combs in her hair and has the sweetest blue dress trimmed with pearl trimmings. That is no patent of good breeding, I am afraid, said Aunt Helen, smiling. Lillian, can't you tell me something more about this latest idol of Peggy's? They really seem very nice girls, Auntie, said Lillian. I think you would like them. They have taken Redlands, that pretty house just beyond the toll bridge on the other side of Warford. Major Middleton has been appointed adjutant to the volunteers. They lived in India for a long time and then in London before they came here. Muriel plays the violin, and they know ever so many musical people and go to the concerts every week in the assembly rooms. It is Maud's birthday on the 13th, and they have invited us all three. Mrs. Middleton was at the dancing class today and spoke to us herself. She said she hoped so much that our aunt would allow us to accept, and we should like to go immensely, added Lillian with a wistful sigh as she remembered Muriel's accounts of the grand piano and the Stradivarius violin, which was her latest acquisition. Go and ask father, then, said Aunt Helen, and if he says yes, I suppose it will be all right. Oh, thank you, cried Peggy, who knew that father would not be likely to resist the combined coaxings of the trio. We must write to Maud tonight. She'll be as pleased as we are. I'm just going to see if my dictionary has assembly rooms. Waiting for it. Waiting. No, it doesn't. We'll try another one. Ah, that is not how you spell assembly. That's not going to find anything. Nope, that one's not working either. I have to try it again with a word that I know is in there. Anyway, we'll see how we go. And she executed a little war dance of delight out in the hall. Such a thing as a party was a great event in the children's calendar. They had few invitations, for there was little visiting now at the Abbey. The anomaly of a country gentleman who ploughed his own fields was felt to be too much for the neighbouring squires, and one by one the county had ceased to call. So this is other people who supposedly have authority and position within the county. Truly, adversity is a great winnower of friendships. It is but the staunchest who will stick to us through our troubles. Here's another word we can test it with. Ah, there you go. Winnow, that which winnows or which is used by winnowing, a contrivance for fanning or winnowing grain. So that last part is the bit I was after. A contrivance for fanning or winnowing grain. So to winnow grain is where you toss grain about so that the air blows through it and the air takes away the chaff. That's all the husky shell bits that are loose. So all you get is the grain and whatever is holding on tight to the grain. Right, carrying on. Truly, adversity is a great winnower of friendships. It is but the staunchest who will stick to us through our troubles, while those who love us for what we have instead of what we are, fall away like chaff at the first breath of ill fortune. Poor Lillian's anticipations, however, were doomed to sad disappointment, for when the much-talked-of day arrived, it brought her such a bad headache that she readily agreed with Aunt Helen's decree that she was better at home. Oh, poor girl. She took it very patiently, poor child, and came downstairs to see the others start off in the little pony trap. Bobby, resplendent in a clean white sailor suit, they were all the rage around the turn of the century, in a clean white sailor suit, and Peggy in a pale blue sprigged muslin dress which Aunt Helen had toiled hard to finish in time. To be sure, it was only made out of last summer's frock, which Lillian had outgrown, but it looked as good as new, and the colour suited her. "How nice you look," said Lillian, gazing with admiration at the grey eyes and pretty brown curls under the little white hat, and thinking that Peggy grew more and more like the Romney portrait which hung on the drawing-room wall. "Mind you behave yourselves," said Aunt Helen, "and don't forget to thank Mrs. Middleton when you say goodbye." "Bless him," said Nancy. Nancy, I think, is the cook and housekeeper. I'm not sure. I can't remember. Doesn't matter. "There won't be any other folks' children there that can beat him to my mind." Father was waving a goodbye from the stackyard, because Father is working on the farm, remember? One of the reasons they've lost a lot of their social contacts. Father was waving a goodbye from the stackyard. Joe held the gate open with a grin of broadest appreciation, and even old David peeped out of the stable door to witness the departure. So they started off in great style and in the very highest of spirits. It was a perfect day for a party, warm enough to make it pleasant to be out of doors, yet not too hot for comfort, and a blue sky without a hint of rain clouds. Pixie, the horse, was fresh and kept up a fine pace, scarcely slacking for the hills, so they soon got over the ground. They were within a mile of Warford, and were going along at a quick trot, when, without any warning, a carriage and pair came suddenly dashing up behind from a side road and past them, giving such scant room that if Peggy had not been a clever little driver and turned Pixie smartly into the hedge, an accident could scarcely have been avoided. Two little girls, the only occupants of the carriage, turned round to stare, but neither the grand cockaded coachman nor the tall footman on the box even looked back to see how the children had fared. Oh dear. I bet they're going to the party. Do you know what a cockade is? Did we look this one up before? I think we did a very long time ago. Oh, we have to put in the word for dictionary. There it is, a rosette or knot of ribbon worn in a hat, especially as an office or party badge. So I don't know if you've seen pictures of French military people from around the 19th, 20th century, that sort of time period. They would often have a round rosette of ribbon with two pieces of coloured ribbon poking up from it, and that was part of the styling. But that whole general idea is what's called a cockade. And so it was kind of a signifier of either who you worked for or what you represented. But obviously this is a coachman if he's got a hat with a cockade on it. "How rude," cried Peggy in great indignation. "I should like to call them back and teach them good manners. They nearly grazed our wheel. I don't think they were more than half an inch off." "I wish they had," declared Bobby, "and then they would have spoilt their own varnish. It would just have served them right." "I wonder who they are," said Peggy. "I never remember seeing that carriage before, but they seem to think the road belongs to them anyhow. If David had been with us, I don't believe they would have done it. But most people are so nice when they see children driving alone. Never mind, we're nearly in Warford now." It was exactly 3 o'clock when the children drove up the drive at Redlands. A number of guests were already assembled on the lawn, both grown-ups and children. A very smart company indeed, holding up such gay parasols that they looked like a flock of bright butterflies. Maud came forward as Peggy drew up with a little prim company manner, so she's on her best behaviour. "How do you do, Peggy? How do you do, Bobby?" She said. "Lillian not come? Oh, so sorry. You've not brought your groom? George, just run into the house, will you, and ring for Withers to take this trap to the stables? Now, won't you come and speak to Mother?" Mrs. Middleton was standing chatting with a number of elegantly dressed ladies, and for a moment she gazed at the children with blank unrecognition. "Margaret Vaughan, Mother," prompted Maud. Of course, said Mrs. Middleton. "I hope you have brought your sisters, my dear. We were charmed by them at the dancing class. And your brother? Oh, yes, the sweet little boy who looks exactly like a Christmas card." I don't know that he would have been that happy to know that. Inwardly hugely indignant at such a description of his manly charms, there you go, Bobby came forward politely to shake hands and was marched off afterwards by good-natured George Middleton to make up a cricket 11. So in cricket, for those of you who don't know, cricket is a ball and bat sport. It's very English. They use a flat bat that is about, I think it's 4 inches wide. It's quite hard. And you keep the bat down towards the ground when you are batting. And instead of whatever the normal number is in other sports, the number in a cricket team of players, the ones who are actually going to play in that game, is 11. So that's why they talk about a cricket 11, as opposed to a rugby 15, which is because you have 15 people in a rugby team on the field at any one time. Anyway, "Perhaps you'll find somebody here you know, dear," said Mrs. Middleton to Peggy as Maud turned away to welcome new guests. "There are several of your little friends here from the dancing class here this afternoon." Peggy walked slowly towards the group of children upon the lawn. There were a few girls whom she knew, but they only nodded and did not come forward to speak to her. A sudden wave of shyness came over her, and she stood apart, feeling somehow very much out of it and longing for the support of Lillian's presence. There were 2 little girls in charming lace frocks and white Tuscan hats with ostrich plumes standing close by, whom Peggy recognised at once as the occupants of the carriage. Oh dear. Which had nearly upset them on the road. The recognition seemed to be mutual, for the elder child nudged the younger, and Peggy could see that they were looking her up and down and evidently taking in all the details of her costume. The Vaughans had not been brought up to think much about clothes, but Peggy felt suddenly, with a little pang, that the muslin frock which they had all thought so pretty when she started off looked hopelessly homemade, and unfashionable compared with the elaborate toilettes of the other guests. Oh dear. Not good. Somehow Maud too seemed to... Sorry, I'm just checking to see if we've got any further dropped frames. Yes, it's still happening. I've got some settings I need to change, obviously. Somehow Maud too seemed quite a different person this afternoon to what she had done before. She had put on a languid, affected manner and sailed about, shaking back her long curls and trying to be very grown up and stylish. And she did not take any more notice of Peggy, nor come up and introduce her to other people and make her feel happy and at home. There were a great many elder people present, but they all stood laughing and talking together, and nobody seemed to think of amusing the children except Mademoiselle, the French governess, who was endeavouring to make the young people talk to each other instead of standing about shyly on the grass. "Would you like a game of croquet, Margaret?" said Muriel, noticing at last that Peggy stood unfriended and alone. "Some of the others are going to play. Do you know Phyllis and Marjorie Norton?" indicating the owners of the lace frocks. "Perhaps you will excuse my coming. I have so many people to see. Mademoiselle will act as umpire." Marjorie gave Peggy a limp hand, but Phyllis only stared. Mademoiselle was dealing out the mallets and arranging the sides with much energy, estimating the players with a keen eye to their possible capabilities. Peggy knew it was unreasonable of her to feel so bitterly disappointed. It was all so different somehow to what she had expected. Accustomed to little quiet schoolgirl parties, she had not thought that would be such a large and fashionable assembly of guests, and had hoped that she would have her dear Maud to herself for a short time at any rate, and be shown the doves and the white pony and the Indian cabinet and the other treasures which her friend had so often described to her during the dancing class. She tried to banish the rather chilled feeling. Of course, I can't expect Maud to attend only to me, she thought. There are such heaps of people here today. I wish they would let me play with the boys. I would have liked it far better. She's used to just being able to be herself. But I can understand why she would prefer to be playing with the boys if that's the case, because she's used to like farmyard games and exploring and things like that. Sorry. But the croquet had already begun, so Peggy threw her whole energy into the game. She excelled in all outdoor sports, having a keen eye and a true stroke, and was soon absorbed in making her hoops and helping on her partners, two quiet little girls considerably younger than herself, who seemed never to have played before, to judge by their absolute lack of skill. Peggy was standing waiting for her turn while the others clustered around, a rather difficult stroke of Marjorie Norton's, when she saw Phyllis, whose ball had been left distinctly wired. I think that means caught up against the wrong side of a hoop, but I'm not sure. Hurriedly push it with her foot into a better position. Peggy had been accustomed from her babyhood to play fair, so she opened her eyes wide to see such deliberate cheating. Phyllis, who had thought herself unobserved, happened at that moment to look up and met Peggy's glance, which was certainly not a flattering one. She flushed scarlet and kicked the ball back to its former place. "I only moved it by accident," she said haughtily. "You have no need to glare at me like that." Peggy dropped her eyes and strolled away. It was a little incident, and she had not spoken a word, yet she had an unpleasant feeling that the mere fact of having noticed the act had made her an enemy. "Very good," Mademoiselle was saying. "A splendid stroke. You shall take 2 hoops and send the ball back away. Tiens, you have missed. It is then the turn of Miss Marguerite." Peggy's next piece of play was so brilliant that it decided the game, and to the great delight of her little partners, they all pegged out. That means you finish the game by putting the ball through the last hoop and hitting the final peg. I think they all pegged out amid the cold applause of their opponents and the ecstatic admiration of Mademoiselle. All the guests were now summoned to tea, which was set out on little tables under the trees and showed a tempting display of cakes and strawberries and cream, while attentive servants bustled about with cups and plates. Much against her inclinations, Peggy found herself sitting side by side with Phyllis Norton. Bobby was a long way off among a jolly set of boys whose shouts of laughter Peggy listened to with wistful ears, and her small partners had been borne away by an elder sister. Phyllis sat for some time stealing glances at Peggy from under her lashes. "I believe we passed you this afternoon coming here," she remarked at last. "Weren't you driving that queer little pony cart?" "Yes, your coachman nearly ran us over." "I don't think he's a very good driver," replied Peggy. Probably not the best thing to say. "Oh, Wilkins always takes the middle of the road and makes everyone else get out of the way," said Phyllis calmly. "Do you live at this side of Warford? I don't remember seeing you before." "We live at Gorswin Abbey," answered Peggy. "Oh, I know, that old farmhouse by the river. We've often passed it by on our way to Wingates. Why, you're quite in the country. Do you go to school, or have you a governess?" "I go to Warford High School. We drive in every day." "To the high school?" said Phyllis with uplifted eyebrows. "Well, I suppose it's all right for farmers' daughters. Marjorie and I go to a London boarding school." Oh dear. Peggy was furious. If she could only have thought of a suitable retort, she would have said something stinging, but usually our smartest remarks occur to us when the occasion has long passed by. Wonderful work on the puzzle. Thank you. Well done. It was one that intrigued me when I first saw it because of the fact that you've got it's called Farm in Bodmin Moor, Cornwall, England, and the photograph is by Helen Hotson of Shutterstock, and it's got a dry stone wall, which means a wall that has been made with stones, just stones. No mortar, no cement, nothing to glue the stones together. They are just stacked together very well. And then behind that, the half ruined wall is a cottage, and it's a dry stone wall cottage. The cottage has been built also out of stone, and it takes quite a lot of skill because you have to pick which stones go where, and if necessary, knock bits off them so that they fit together well. Anyway, we'll carry on. I will find you another picture because I do have some other links here. I shall just get that set up and then we shall carry on. Now, it's 104 pieces. There's enough similarity in the pieces that I'm not going to make it more than that, just because it might make it a little bit too hard to do. And here we go with the, I'll get you the link in a minute. Just got to put it in the my command center. There you go. That should be good to go on the jigsaw puzzle command if you want to pull it up. You don't have to, just if you would like to. Peggy was furious. If she could only have thought of a suitable retort, she would have said something stinging. But usually our smartest remarks occur to us when the occasion has long passed by, and perhaps it is all the better, for we are saved from bitter words which once spoken are not easily forgotten by the hearers, however keenly we may regret them ourselves. As it was, she could only walk away with what dignity she could summon, for tea was over, the boys were rushing back to the cricket, and the girls collecting in little groups to arrange tennis sets. "Come and look round the garden, Peggy," said Maud, at last taking some notice of her friend. "We've scarcely seen anything of you all the afternoon." Peggy forbore to remark that it was not her fault, and cheering up a little, she joined the select circle whom Maud was conducting through the greenhouses and conservatories. The Middletons had a fine collection of orchids. I knew it was orchids, but my mouth said orchids. Orchids, which are a type of flower, and rare plants, which were much admired by the young visitors, though simple Peggy could not help thinking they were not half so pretty as the roses and lilies in the old garden at home, and certainly the grand Scottish gardener was not nearly so nice as David or Joe, for he seemed quite to resent their presence and followed them about grimly for fear they should disturb anything or pluck any of the fruit or flowers. Yes, because he will be the one who gets in trouble for if there's damage. "We're going to London next week," drawled Maud in her most grown-up manner. "We've taken a house in Mayfair. Mother always likes to go up for a while during the season. We've so many friends, don't you know. I expect we shall have a lovely time. We drive in the park every day, and Father has promised to take us to Lohengrin. Have you seen it, Linda?" Linda had not seen it, but she had been to other operas, and was only too pleased to air her knowledge. So the conversation turned upon plays and actors, and Peggy, who had never been inside a theatre in her life, could only stand and listen. She felt so shy and stupid and so apart from the other girls that she began to wish heartily that she had never come, and long for the hour when it would be time to go home, and even to wonder how she could ever have thought that she liked Maud so much. Though she was quite different to this at the dancing lessons, she reflected. A welcome diversion came outside, however, in the shape of a beautiful white Persian kitten, who submitted to pettings with gracious condescension, arched her back, and purred loudly. "I'll fetch Carlo," said Maud, who was genuinely fond of her pets and liked to show them to an appreciative audience. And she returned in a moment, leading a fine Saint Bernard by the collar. But Carlo's mistress had not calculated upon his love of sport. No, for no sooner did the naughty dog see the white kitten than he simply went for it, and Puss only saved her life by springing up a yew tree close by. The poor little creature was so terrified that she leapt from bough to bough, till suddenly, losing her foothold, she fell with a crash and hung suspended by her neck in the fork of a branch. "Oh, look at her! She'll be hanged! Whatever shall I do?" shrieked Maud, wringing her hands helplessly in an agony of alarm. "Call the gardener or somebody," suggested Linda. But an animal in trouble was a sight which flung Peggy's shyness to the winds, and she sprang like a knight-errant to the rescue. She was up the yew tree in 2 leaps and a bound, and by crawling along an overhanging bough, clinging to a branch and making a long arm, and here I finally have an illustration I can show you. There you go. Up the yew tree. Yes, that does look like a yew to me. Here's the girls on the ground, and here's Peggy up the tree. And there's the kitten. See, its body's hanging here and its head's up here. And making a long arm, she managed to seize the cat by the scruff of her neck and release her from her dangerous position. "Oh, thank you," said Maud as Peggy came down from the tree with grazed hands and rumpled frock. "You're really too good. Withers might have fetched her with a ladder. Look how you've torn your dress." "Never mind my dress. She'd have been dead if I'd waited for another moment," remarked Peggy dryly, feeling rather snubbed, for several of the girls were smiling as if they thought she had been a little too enthusiastic. Funny that. Sorry, I've just got some things I have to check every now and then. I see you. Thank you for the follow. I'll carry on with the reading. "Never mind my dress. She'd have been dead if I'd waited another moment," remarked Peggy dryly, feeling rather snubbed. For several of the girls were smiling as if they thought she had been a little too enthusiastic. "Well done," cried a voice from the background, and a tall, brown-bearded man, who had been a silent spectator of the whole scene, came forward to join the group. "Mr. Neville!" exclaimed Maud. "Where did you spring from?" "Only arrived 10 minutes ago, just in time to witness a most gallant act. Please introduce me to the heroine, who I think is a true friend in need." "What, Miss Peggy Vaughan? Any relation to the Vaughans of Gorswen Abbey? Then, my dear, I am very pleased to make your acquaintance, for I knew your father long ago, and your grandfather too." "Ooh, one up for Peggy." Peggy liked her new friend at once. His twinkling blue eyes, his bronzed face, his jovial voice, and rather unconventional dress seemed to mark him as distinct and different to other people. His arrival seemed to alter the whole atmosphere. Maud's supercilious manner slipped away from her like magic, and she became once more the pleasant Maud of the dancing class, and her friends, feeling the change, soon left off trying to be poor little imitations of grown-up people, and began at last to enjoy themselves, for true enjoyment does not consist in showing off, but in being our simple, natural selves, if people would only believe it. "Now then, what are you all doing?" cried Mr. Neville, the boys playing cricket by themselves, and the girls mooning about, keeping their frocks nice. "Scandalous! Come along, all of you, and we'll get up some mixed sports. I stopped in the town and filled my pockets with prizes when I heard you were having a party. I'm sure a young lady who can climb a tree looks capable of doing a high jump." After that, the rest of the afternoon simply flew. Mr. Neville was a capital organiser, and had such a delightful way with children that they all made friends with him in 5 minutes. He impounded the grown-ups in the sports, made the grown-ups play as well, and his jolly, hearty, good spirits seemed so infectious that almost before they realised what they were doing, elegant young ladies were holding up skipping ropes, and smart young gentlemen flung off their coats and forgot their high collars in the enthusiasm of the contests. Even Phyllis Norton was shrieking in a potato race, and only laughed when she fell and soiled her immaculate lace frock. Instead of getting upset, she only laughed. As for Peggy, she was quite in her element. Quite in her element. Long jumps, high jumps, handicaps, sack races, three-legged races. She was ready to compete in all, and to her delight, won several prizes, while Bobby, too, gained his share of laurels. The unfashionable muslin dress with its long tear was forgotten, and several people asked who that charming little girl was with the sweet grey eyes and the pretty hair, who could run so splendidly. Vaughan, I remember a Vaughan up at Brasenose in my first year at Oxford. A fine-looking fellow he was too, said a heavily moustached officer, regarding Peggy with a critical eye. Her father, no doubt. They're a very old family, quite one of the county, in fact, said Mrs. Middleton, gushing over her small guest, now she found she was a success. Maud hugged Peggy when she said goodbye in quite her old affectionate manner, and Muriel remembered to send her love to Lillian and say she was sorry for her absence, a fact she had scarcely seemed to notice before. As for Mr. Neville, Peggy confided to Aunt Helen when she got home that she liked him the best of any gentleman she had ever seen, next to father. He's been out in India for 10 years, Auntie, and that's where he knew the Middletons, but he says he lived in England once and used to come to Gorswin when father was alive. Do you remember him? I think I do, replied Aunt Helen shortly, with a flush on her cheek that was still so smooth and pretty, the reference being to the fact that Aunt Helen is a little older now, so she hasn't lost her youthfulness in some way. Maybe that's who the letter was from, and the hard words between them. Then don't you think, persisted Peggy, that he is quite the nicest man you've ever met? Go to bed, children, said Aunt Helen. There's Bobby so sleepy he can hardly keep his eyes open. You shall tell me all about the party tomorrow. Aunt Helen doesn't want to talk about this at the moment, and that's the end of the chapter, and I think we shall have another one. What do you think? Time for a drink and snacks. Get on with it. And if you haven't got them with you, quick, rush off and go and get them now. Go on. And I'm just saying hi to my new follower, which is, I'm trying to think of the best way to put this. Someone I know from the tech community here in New Zealand. Gersherman is the surname normally, I think. Something like that. Anyway, one of the names associated with him. So hi and thank you for following. That's great to have you here. And yes, I do not yet have my alerts set up to actually show on the stream itself, only in the chat, and I'm so sorry about that. Mauricio. Anyway, it's great, as I said, great to have you here. Now let's see what's going on. Yeah, it's still sitting at unstable, just under 5,000 kbps, and I'm not sure why, and I'm going to have to sort that one out after I've finished streaming. Oh dear. It's really not in a good mood today, is it? That's a shame. No idea why. Don't know what's up. Anyway, snacks and drinks. So here's my coffee. I've had a mouthful of water. I'll try not to talk and drink and choke. So here we go. It's working so far. And time for one of my noisy crackers. Cheese and crackers and sun-dried tomato. Not quite so noisy because the cheese has softened it for me, which is great. So I'll give you a couple of links. And do let me know if my keyboard sounds any different now that I've got the shock mount for my microphone. Right. Oh, yeah, one last command for you. So those who are unaware of it, yeah, there's a system for sending gifts to people called Throne, and New Zealand isn't part of the zone where they actually literally send something to you when someone purchases it for you, and it's a really cool system in the countries where they do it that way. Because it maintains the privacy of both parties, the sender and the receiver. Like, you don't know each other's bank details or credit card details. You don't know each other's address. If you're using a screen name, not your IRL name, it doesn't expose that at all. So it's a great system for that. It maintains your privacy. So because New Zealand is not one of the countries where they have a lot of retailers that they deal with, suppliers that they deal with, what they have is a payout system. So if somebody clicks on my Throne links and chooses something from my wish list and chooses to get that for me, then it will put the value of that into my Throne account so that I then initiate the purchase within my own country for that. But I don't have to provide the money for it because it's provided as that gift. So it's really cool that they've actually opened it up to us here in New Zealand, because there's a lot of things that work really well in North America and Europe that just don't in New Zealand because we're considered to be too far away. You try and send something from overseas and it can take months to get here just because of freight and other things like that. We're not prioritised as a country to send things to in terms of when there's a whole lot of goods being made available for sale. If most of the buyers are in, say, North America, they will get priority over us. So if it goes out of stock, we're not likely to get it, unless we happen to purchase right at the moment when stuff is directly available. It's just that sort of thing. It's the way it works when you live in the far-flung reaches of the world. Anyway, so let's get on with the next section of reading. I have had my snacks and my drink, and I hope that you have too. Sorry, my hair is starting to tickle, so I'll just get that out of the way. Let's get on with reading. Why not? Right, we are reading A Terrible Tomboy by Angela Brazel, written in 1904, and this is Chapter 8, The Holidays. A little work, a little play to keep us going, and so good day. There you go. No more Latin, no more Greek, no more cane to make me squeak, sang Bobby on the 15th of July, springing off the pony trap before Pixie had stopped and taking a flying leap over the pump trough in the exuberance of his spirits. A pump trough. That's a trough where you pump water into to feed the animals. A water pump instead of a tap, because they used to have to draw the water up from a well or some other reservoir under the ground. School is over, hooray, shouted Peggy, banging down her books on the mounting block. And a mounting block is used for, it's like made out of stone or concrete or something like that. And it's a couple of really big steps that you climb up to be able to be tall enough to be able to get onto a horse. So that's a mounting block. There you go. Banging down her books on the mounting block and waltzing into the kitchen where Aunt Helen and Nancy were busy making jam. Don't you hear, Auntie? We've broken up for 8 weeks. School holidays. Yay. That's definitely what's going on. We've broken up for 8 weeks. Isn't it glorious? I hear fast enough, but I'm afraid it will be a doubtful pleasure for Nancy and me if you are all going mad like this. My dear child, don't you think you might choose a less juicy seat than a tray full of raspberries? Peggy jumped up in a hurry. I really didn't see them, she said. I'll go and help Lillian unharness Pixie. Joe's away in the turnip field. No home lessons tonight. Hip, hip, hooray! And she took herself off like a little whirlwind. The holidays were indeed a delightful respite after the weary round of examinations which generally makes life a burden at the end of the summer term, because it's the end of the school year, usually. And the children set to work to enjoy them thoroughly. Bobby had taken to entomology. Do you know what entomology is? Let's see if our friendly little dictionary widget will help us with that. Let's see if I spelled it correctly first. I think so. Entomology, the study of insects and, informally, of other arthropods and occasionally other invertebrates. I have a great aunt who was an entomologist. Rather unusual in that day and age. There you go. Wonderful. So Bobby had taken to entomology and panted over the hot pastures, chasing butterflies with unflagging zeal. Oh, he's getting hot and tired, running around the place after insects. At dusk he would enlist Peggy's services, and the pair went treacling for moths. A careful mixture of gin and syrup was smeared upon the trees. Aunt says hi from North Carolina Beach. Say hi back to Aunt for me. Thank you so much. Not a worry. I'm hoping that she's really enjoying it wherever from her North Carolina beach, because she did say that she was going to be away. I hope it's a wonderful break and not sort of lots of onerous family things or anything like that, but a really decent break. So that's good. And thank you so much for passing that on. That's good to hear. At dusk, he would enlist Peggy's services, and the pair went treacling for moths. And here we are getting the instructions for what treacling is. A careful mixture of gin and syrup. That would be treacle syrup. It's like golden syrup, but it's darker and not as sweet. And I think it's actually nicer for certain purposes, where we would normally use golden syrup in New Zealand on, say, hot buttered crumpets. Treacle is nicer if you find that golden syrup is too sweet. Try it. A careful mixture of gin and syrup was smeared upon the trees, which were afterwards visited with a lantern, when the unfortunate insects could easily be taken in the midst of their revels, falling sad victims to the sin of intemperance. Caterpillars too were caught and kept in boxes till the rose parlour became so full of interesting specimens that Aunt Helen for once rebelled and ordered this new branch of the menagerie to be removed from the loft. To the loft, from the rose parlour. I found one of your beasties inside my hat and another in my teacup, she complained, so you'd better keep them where it does not matter much if they escape. Lillian devoted herself to art and sallied forth with her paint box, pencils and sketch block in quite a professional manner, looking for subjects. To be sure, the perspective of her cottages was apt to be rather peculiar at times, and the Welsh mountains turned out a more vivid shade of purple, and the fields a far more brilliant green than nature had ever painted them. One of the early stages of learning when you're working with watercolours, because that's probably what she's using, is to actually make it understated rather than overstated, so you can get the subtlety of what things actually look like. So I think she's got a little way to go yet. The fields are far more brilliant green than nature had ever painted them, but it was all good practice, and the admiring Peggy thought that no Royal Academician fellow of the Royal Academy of Art could have produced such charming masterpieces. There was a little work too to make the playtime all the sweeter. Fruit to be picked, peas and beans to shell, the garden to weed, and great piles of bread and cheese to be cut and carried out into the fields for the harvesters' drinkings. And that would be morning and afternoon tea, probably. But as Bobby said, it was all play work, and much nicer than lessons anyhow. Peggy lay one afternoon at full length on the grass under the lime tree, deep in the pages of Treasure Island. We haven't read that one here. It's by Robert Louis Stevenson. Some people think it's a little bit intense for young children. Not as intense as Coral Island, I have to say. I've read them both by him. Anyway, deep in the pages of Treasure Island. It was rather a grown-up book, perhaps for a little girl, but it was all about pirates. Checking which out, the moth catching or the Treasure Island versus Coral Island books, or sorry, I'm getting lost. Perhaps for a little girl, but it was all about pirates and sailors and hairbreadth escapes of so wildly exciting a nature that she read on till she almost wept with disappointment to think that she was not a boy to go to sea and meet with such thrilling adventures. From the rose parlour came the strains of the piano, where Lillian was wailing a melancholy little ditty with keen enjoyment. It is mostly when we are very young that we take the greatest delight in the sad songs. Those who have felt the real bitterness of sorrow are glad to bury it deeply away and do not wish it wakened, as sailors' wives love a place best where they cannot hear the sound of the waves. Lillian had always taken rather a delight in what Nancy called the melancholics. When quite a tiny child, she had much preferred the tragedy of Red Riding Hood to the brighter fate of the princesses who lived happily ever afterwards, and with tears streaming down her fat little cheeks would quaver out, "Tell it again." Well done on the puzzle. That's excellent. Old German farm wagon. The photographer is Magnetismus, I think it was. Anyway, so there you go, and I do have one more picture for you here. I shall get that and then we'll carry on reading. Whoops, wrong click. I've got so many things open here, I shouldn't. Now this one here isn't specifically to do with this reading at all. It's just a picture that I happened to pick up, and I hope it's not one that I actually already used previously, but we'll see, won't we? $119 puzzle pieces, that'll do. You don't want it too complicated at the moment. Oh, goodness me. The delay on the stream is quite long at the moment. I'm just looking at my other window and seeing how much longer it is. There you go, that should be good to go. With quick tears streaming down her fat little cheeks, she would quaver out, "Tell it again." Her first efforts in poetry had been in a distinctly pensive strain. When only about 9 years old, she had composed "The Dying Child's Last Words." "Remember me when I am gone, and me thou canst not see. When I lie sleeping in my grave, dear friends, remember me. You'll keep my little garden neat, my clothes you'll fold away, my playthings in a drawer you'll put, with which I last did play." Yeah, that's rather depressing for a young child's first poetry. Oh well, there ought to have been more verses, but at this point Father had unfortunately got hold of the paper and persisted in treating the poem in such a comic light that the indignant authoress had never found the heart to finish it, though the fragment was considered very talented by Aunt Helen and carefully put away in an old workbox with the first specimens of Peggy's handwriting and one of Bobby's little baby curls. Peggy came to the end of her book at last, and life seemed so stale and flat anywhere out of the South Seas that she wandered down the garden for a little diversion. Have you ever had that? You've been so absorbed in a story that when you get to the end of it, you just want to stay in that world and everything else is just sort of like unreal and disappointing, and you don't want to be there. You want to be back inside the story. Yeah, done that. Not necessarily this particular story, but that's okay. Trying to find where I got up to. Peggy came to the end of her book at last, and life seemed so stale and flat anywhere out of the South Seas that she wandered down the garden for a little diversion, Lillian's fresh young voice proclaiming that her heart was breaking, came wafting along the terrace, mingled with the sound of the reaping machine and the indignant gobble-gobble of the old turkey which Bobby was chasing around the pasture. "Let him alone, you naughty boy. Whatever mischief will you be in next?" cried Aunt Helen, flying to the rescue of the patriarch of her poultry yard, and enforcing her remarks by sounding raps on the culprit's curly brown pate, tapping Bobby on the head. Bobby was the apple of her eye, but she considered wholesome chastisement to be necessary to his moral welfare. Sometimes you need something uncomfortable to help you to remember not to do something, especially when you're young. "Oh, Auntie, I've finished my book and we've nothing much to do this afternoon. Don't you think we might take our tea into the woods?" said Peggy, swinging herself over the garden wall and into the pasture. "Yes, you can if you like. Only you must get the baskets ready yourselves and not worry Nancy. You may as well buy a loaf while you're out too," said Aunt Helen, rummaging a shilling out of her pocket. "We're baking again today, but the harvesters take so much bread for the drinkings. Get some tea cakes too, if they have any." "All right," cried Peggy, rushing off with enthusiasm to rouse Lillian from the piano and forage in the pantry for a supply of jam and butter. Half an hour later, an interesting procession started off from the kitchen door. Lillian first with the basket of cups and provisions, Peggy with the milk can, that's so they can drink the milk, and Bobby armed with the kettle, so it's milk for the tea then. Bobby with the kettle, while Rolo, that's the puppy, seemed to be everywhere at once and as pleased as anybody. "I've got the matches," said Peggy, "and a newspaper. You're sure you put in the spoons, Lillian? We forgot them last time." They didn't. If they were making tea, they will need to measure out the tea leaves. They might do it in their hand, but if you're eating something that needs a spoon, you do want a spoon. Dear. Yeah, shame on those wayward drunken insects. Absolutely. Sorry, that was just reading Squibble's comment because she's got to the part of me streaming where I asked the question about what her previous comment was about. It's so delayed today. It's a shame. I'm going to have to look at the settings. I'm sure something has changed. "Have you got the spoon? Did you put the spoons in, Lillian? We forgot them last time." The place where the children were going was a delightful spot for a picnic. A rapid stream ran through the woods, dashing down over great boulders, making little cascades and waterfalls as it went, with here and there a deep, clear pool where the trout lay, snugly under the stones, and the rocks under overhanging trees were carpeted with the softest and greenest of moss. And tall ferns grew right down to the water's edge, mingling with trailing ivy and creeping moneywort. A grassy glade under a tall beech seemed intended by nature for a summer house, for there was a large flat stone in the middle, which served for a table and a circle of little stones around it, just high enough for seats, so that you might imagine Queen Mab and her fairies dined here on moonlight nights, with the squirrels for guests and the bats and owls for waiters. I like that idea. The children put down their baskets and ran about gathering dry sticks to build their fire. There were plenty of dead branches strewn about in the wood, and so they soon had a goodly pile of fuel. Bobby filled the kettle at the stream and planted it firmly on Lillian's elaborate erection of sticks. Peggy struck a match and set the paper alight. All went up went the smoke, and in a few moments the bonfire was blazing grandly. But unfortunately the picnic party had quite forgotten that burning wood does not make a very substantial foundation, for the whole pile suddenly collapsed and over went the kettle, spilling all the water and putting out the fire with a hiss. Yes. "What a nuisance!" exclaimed Lillian. "We must find something to hang the kettle on, like the gypsies do." "Suppose we make a kind of fireplace between two stones, and then we can put a thick branch across," suggested Peggy. "It will be easier to lift the kettle off, too. I don't know how we should have seized it from the middle of that blaze." The second attempt proved a much greater success, and in a short time the water was boiling bravely, while a very attractive feast was spread out upon the mossy table. Lillian had filled the teapot, and the company was just about to sit down and fall to with much relish when the party was suddenly augmented by an unexpected guest. Down the little path from the glen above solemnly marched a very small girl indeed, so round and fat and chubby that she looked nearly as broad as she was long. She was a pretty child with soft dark eyes and pink cheeks, so plump and full that the little nose seemed almost to be lost between them. A pair of stout brown legs showed under the smocked holland pinafore. Her white sun hat hung upon her back, and she clasped a dilapidated doll in her arms. She strolled up to the astonished children with the dignity of a duchess. "I saw you lighting the fire," she announced calmly, "so I took Isabella and I've come to tea." "We're very glad to see you, I'm sure," said Lillian. "Is Isabella your dolly?" "No, she's my child." "I don't call her a dolly. It hurts her feelings, so please don't say it again." "I'm ever so sorry," apologised Lillian, trying to repress Bobby's giggles. "Whose little girl are you?" "I'm Father's girl. Father's painting pictures up there in the wood. I paint pictures too, sometimes when Isabella don't want me," confided the juvenile artist, and to judge from the smears of paint upon her pinafore, she had evidently been pursuing that art with more vigour than discretion. "Won't you come and sit on my lap?" said Peggy coaxingly, for she loved small children. The chubby infant looked the slight figure up and down as if appraising the offered accommodation. "She hasn't got a lap to sit upon," she remarked scornfully, settling her stout legs on the grass. "You haven't told us your name yet," said Lillian, trying to draw out the interesting visitor. "My name's Matilda Christabel Wilkins, but they call me Matty for short." "Are you sure they don't call you Fatty?" inquired Bobby. "Not appropriate, Bobby." "No, only rude people. Nice people call me Miss Wilkins. I don't like boys. I was 4 last week, so I'm quite a big girl now. Will the doggy hurt me? I think I will have some of that cake." "Hadn't you better begin with bread and butter?" said Lillian. "No, dear, the doggy won't hurt you. It's only his play. Come here, Rollo. I'm afraid I haven't a spare cup, but perhaps you wouldn't mind having some milk in a saucer. Are you staying about here?" "Yes, at the farmhouse. I help Mary to do the milk to milk the cows. Mary sings to them. I can sing too. Would you like to hear me sing now?" If it won't trouble you too much," began Lillian. "No, I like it," said Miss Wilkins, who crossed her short legs, turned up the brown eyes, and broke forth into such a very extraordinary burst of melody that the children were nearly in fits. It had neither time nor tune, but the notes quavered about on the scale like a distant representation of the bagpipes. From the words, they supposed it must be meant for a hymn, and it wound on through 6 or 7 verses till Bobby grew quite hysterical. "Thank you," said Lillian, stifling her mirth when the youthful Madame Patty had at length drawn to a close. "Where did you learn that?" "I learn it on Sundays out of a book. Shall I sing it for you over again?" evidently thirsting for an encore. "Hadn't you better have some tea first?" suggested Peggy hastily. "See, I've put strawberry jam on your bread and butter." The attractions of preserve seemed to outweigh the charms of music, for Miss Wilkins ate stolidly for 5 minutes without volunteering any further remarks. "You've got freckles on your nose," she announced at length to Lillian. "And she's torn her dress," she said with an eye on Peggy. "What a lot that boy eats. Nurse says it's very rude to fill your mouth so full." She pointed a severe finger at Bobby, which so convulsed him that he nearly choked. I'm guessing she didn't eat any less heartily than he did. "Perhaps you would like some cake now," said Lillian, politely passing the basket to the stranger. "Thank you. I'll take 2 pieces because Isabella would like one. I think I'd better be going home now. Goodbye. I'll call again another day." And the young laddie crammed 1 piece of cake into a diminutive pocket, and, munching on the other, strolled away up the glen with the luckless Isabella, head downward, under her arm. "I hope she'll be all right. She's such a dot to wander about alone," said Lillian anxiously. peering through the trees and much relieved at seeing a tall figure in a brown velvet jacket catch up Miss Wilkins and bear her up upon his shoulder. I suppose they're staying at Brown's farm. I know they sometimes let rooms during the summer. She's a queer young customer at any rate. I feel quite ill with laughing, said Bobby, swallowing down his 5th cup of tea and flinging his crumbs for the robins. Let's clear up then. Suppose instead of going straight down by the village, we walk up through the woods to Pengarth and buy the bread there. We can leave our things here under the tree till we come back, said Peggy, hastily swilling the teacups in the stream and packing them up in the basket. The others readily agreed, and they set off for a glorious scramble up the steep hillside. The path was so narrow that in places they could scarcely push through the thick, overhanging bushes and the trailing brambles where the blackberries were already turning red and showed a fine promise for the autumn. The trees were covered with nuts, which Bobby cracked with persistent hope and perpetual disappointment when he found them all yet empty of kernels. It's a little bit early in the year to be cracking nuts to get anything to eat. They crossed the stream by a bridge roughly made of 2 pine trees flung from bank to bank, with a rope for a handrail, a somewhat dizzy foothold for anyone who minded the rushing water underneath, but infinitely to be preferred to stones and mortar, in the children's opinion. Up the steep bank they trudged, through fields of bracken higher than Bobby's head, getting out at last upon a white road that wound along the top of a cliff, with a stream roaring below, till around a sudden turn they came upon Pengarth, a prim little village, nestling in a hollow, and consisting of a short street and a big chapel and schoolhouse. There was a small general shop in Pengarth where groceries and boots, apples and red herrings seemed all mixed up with yards of print fabric and ribbon, penny ink bottles, milk cans, sunbonnets, gingerbread, pear drops, and bull's-eyes, presided over by a funny old woman in a black wig and horn spectacles, who seemed to find much enjoyment in gossiping with her customers, for the children had to wait quite a long time, while the chief points of last Sunday's sermon in chapel and the new dress of the minister's wife were freely discussed. At length the stout firemen's wives picked up their baskets and took their departure, and old Mrs. Ellis was able to give her undivided attention to Lillian's modest little voice, which had been striving to make itself heard in a vain request for bread and tea cakes for the last 10 minutes. I say, Lil, couldn't we go straight down the wood here and cross the stream by the picnic place instead of the pine bridge? It would save nearly a mile, suggested Bobby as they turned to go home. Oh dear, oh dear. I suppose we could get over the stepping stones, replied Lillian rather doubtfully. I don't think there's a proper path through the wood, but we could find our way somehow, and it is certainly much shorter. Shortcuts are never shorter, not in the forest or in the woods. So they plunged down through the thick tangle of trees which clothed the side of the cliff. It was so steep that in places they were obliged to sit down and slide, clutching at the trees as they passed to save themselves from falling, and bringing down such showers of small loose stones and shale that it seemed as if the whole hillside was sliding too. And Lillian was very relieved when they all got safely to the bottom. Now that they were really close to the water, the stepping stones looked much further apart than they had imagined, and very slippery and slimy too, with a swift current flowing between. They all stopped and looked at it for a moment, each secretly wishing that somebody else would offer to go first, but nobody liking to take the plunge. Even Rollo stood whimpering and whining on the bank, as if he did not half like the adventure. "Here goes!" cried the gallant Bobby at last, leading the way as though he were charging at the enemy, and with 4 jumps and a long leap he managed to get over, dry-shod, with Rollo at his heels, barking loudly and furiously. Not to be outdone in pluck, Peggy essayed to follow with equal style, but her foot slipped on a particularly green and moss-grown boulder, and in a moment she had plunged, tea cakes and all, into an impromptu bath. Luckily it was not deep, and she soon scrambled out and fished up the paper bag as well, but she was very wet, and she was a very wet and draggled object, and as for the tea cakes, they were a moist wreck. Would have been better to toss them over, the stream, I think. Oh, I know I shall go in too, wailed Lillian from the other side. I'd better try and save the bread at any rate. And she flung the loaf with all the strength she could muster across the stream. Clever girl. It fell well on the opposite bank, and Peggy made a desperate effort to catch it, but it eluded her grasp, and rolling down the bank with a series of aggravating bounds, descended with a splash to seek a watery grave. I forgot about the slope. Sorry. There, it's gone, and it's in such a deep hole too. We can't possibly get it out. We shall have to leave it for the fish, said Peggy, poking vainly into the depths with a long stick. Lil, you'll never get over if you stand shivering on the brink like that. Do come along. But Lillian popped down onto the grass and pulled off her shoes and stockings as the most speedy way of solving the difficulty, and hustled Miss Peggy home with all possible haste to be dried. So she walked through the water to cross. For the water was very cold, and her teeth were chattering in her head, while her dripping garments left such a moist track as she went that Bobby unfeelingly compared her to a watering cart. What am I to do with such terrible children? Said poor Aunt Helen as the trio recounted their adventures round the supper table. I can scarcely let you out of my sight without you tearing your clothes to ribbons or come home half drowned. They're chips off the old block, Helen, laughed Father. We Vaughans have a natural love of adventure. It's in the blood and bound to come out somehow. So best let it have its fling while they are young, and they'll sober down when they come to years of discretion. Eh, Bairns? Don't you agree with me? Bairns, young ones. Let's just check that is what it's meant. Don't you agree with me? And the hearty young pairs of lungs carried the resolution with a unanimous rather. Bairns, a child or baby. A bairn or bairns are multiple. There you go. Rather, said the children in agreement. And that's the end of that chapter and today's reading, because the next chapter's too long, sorry. But I will give you a hint. It is chapter 9 called A Mountain Walk. Interesting. Very interesting. Oh, we have had that picture before. Sorry. I try to make sure that I move the picture link that I have saved to a different location, but I obviously didn't on that one. Well, yeah, I've moved all of them now. So all of the rest of them are not going to end up getting doubled up unless I accidentally pick a picture that's one have had before. So what's going on? What have I got ahead of me this week? We've got another chapter on Friday, unless there's something happens, of course. How far through this book are we? There's quite a way to go yet. We've had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 chapters out of 24. So there's twice as many to go as we've had already. Or a third of the way through. There you go. That's a little bit different. And I'm looking at the stream over here on my other monitor, and it's incredibly slow. So many dropped frames and so far behind, and I'm really, really sorry about that. I don't know why at all. I'm thinking there's either an internet connection issue, which it could be, or there's actually something changed in my setup, which I've had happen once before, where there was something that was changed and I needed to change a setting on it. Don't know which one it is though. Sorry about that. Thankfully, you'll be able to watch it over on YouTube when I finally get it over there, and I'm going to give you the link for that. Oh, and that was the other thing I was going to do. For those of you who are on Twitch, I will show it to you here. There you go. Here is the link for, if you're on YouTube, here's the link for me over on Twitch, so you can join in with the live stream and get involved with the chat and also do the jigsaw puzzles. Now, that's the one for Twitch. And if you're on Twitch and you want to find me on YouTube, this is the link for it here. Now, I'm showing it to you. It's not clickable there, but on both of those services, in my profile, you will find the link for the relevant one. So on YouTube, you'll find my Twitch link, and on Twitch, you will find my YouTube link. So if you're on Twitch and you want to catch up with stories, about 2 weeks after when I have read them to you, oops, hit the wrong button. No, not that one, that one. About 2 weeks after I have read to you, the videos will show up on YouTube, and they go into playlists for each of the books that I've read. What else? I'm trying to think. I'm sure there's something else I was going to tell you about or remind you of or something. Do come and join us on Discord. It's as busy or as quiet as we make it. So if you want it to be nice and chatty, then come over there and chat. If you've got thoughts about another book to follow this one up with, but it does need to be a public domain book unless I can get express permission to read something that is still within copyright. But please come and make suggestions over on our Discord server. And I will give you the link again for that, just because why not? Trying to type, mouse was in the way and I couldn't see what I'd typed incorrectly. Anyway, I'm trying to think if there's something else. I can probably tell you a little. The only reason I'm still blethering on is because there are people doing the jigsaw puzzle and I don't want the stream to stop, because even when there's a stream delay, if I stop now, it will actually stop where you're watching on the stream, from what I've seen before. It's not when I think it's finished and sending it across, it's actually when I click the stop button at my end, just because of the way it works. I've told you previously about the author, Angela Brazel, that part of her family background has something to do with South America, to do with Brazil, I would guess. Where is it? It's here, it's here, it's here. She was born in England. Yep. And her mother was the daughter of the owner of a shipping company that was based in Rio de Janeiro. And she had the grandmother had a Spanish mother. And the author was the youngest of 4. It was a sister and 2 brothers. So she's the youngest in the family, even though so far her character's a middle character. Lillian's the oldest, and then there's Peggy, and then there's Bobby, the younger brother. And her father was involved with mill management, so like cotton mills and things like that, where they're making fabric. And so they had moved around a lot to do with that. She had gone to a school for a little while and then been kicked out because she was used to a more relaxed lifestyle. And it was something that her mother had tried to give the children a more relaxed educational stance and home style, because of what she had heard from her mother about what school used to be like when it was more strictly run, and she didn't like that idea. And so she had tried to pass that on to her children, where it was a much more relaxed lifestyle. She actually became a governess for a while, but she spent most of her life with her family, rather than actually going off and getting married and having a separate family of her own. That's about it. She first started writing when she was 10 years old, but none of that was published. It wasn't until later on. So there you go. That's a lot of it about Angela Brazel. And I can't think of anything else. I should see if there's anybody that we could go and... no, wrong thing. I clicked on the wrong thing. Please ignore that. I was going to see if there was anyone we could go and raid. So let's see if they're available. Hoot House live stream is live. So let's go and raid Hoot House live stream. They are the people who have the owl box and they have the horses. And it's basically a bunch of cameras in their yard that are showing things. And often when we arrive, because the time of day it is for them compared with us, they're in North America, there will still be somebody around. And if you say hi and that sort of thing, they will say something. But don't be surprised if in about half an hour's time they're all off to go to bed and go to sleep. The camera stays on, but the people aren't staying up. So let's get ready to raid. Here we go. And there's a few of us ready to go. And here we go. See you all. Bye. Happy reading.